Friends, Catholics, truth seekers, ask yourselves this. In a church so often divided, so frequently battling within its own walls, what if the greatest act of papal leadership isn't to draw new lines, but to erase old ones? This question, shocking in its simplicity perhaps, is at the very heart of understanding Pope Leo XIV, a man whose early pontificate is already prompting both fervent admiration and intense debate. We live in times when the Church finds itself navigating a tempest of strong, often polarized opinions. In such an era, it becomes not merely helpful, but absolutely essential to take a step back, to breathe, and to look at things with clarity, to resist the immediate impulse to choose a side. Today's unfolding developments offer us a more complete, a more nuanced look at Pope Leo XIV. Not a caricature, not a headline, but a complex figure whose actions continue to inspire, and yes, sometimes perplex. Whether one agrees with his specific approaches or not, understanding his choices, seeing the subtle threads he is weaving, helps us glimpse a fuller, more authentic picture of his papacy. This isn't about partisanship. It's about looking honestly at who he is, what he is doing, and from there, allowing the facts, as they emerge, to speak for themselves. One recent decision by Pope Leo XIV, seemingly a minor liturgical appointment, is already drawing considerable attention from Catholics around the world, precisely because of its unexpected nature. He has officially appointed Cardinal Robert Sarah as his special envoy for a major event in France. The Cardinal, a figure of both deep respect and significant controversy, will represent the Holy Father at the upcoming liturgical celebrations, taking place on July 25th and 26th at the shrine of Saint Anne in the town of Sainte-Anne-d'Auray. This commemoration marks the 400th anniversary of the reported apparitions of Saint Anne, a moment deeply rooted in Catholic devotion, history, and sacred tradition. What makes this appointment especially noteworthy, indeed remarkably striking, is the figure at the very center of it, Cardinal Robert Sarah. For 2 pivotal days, he will serve in a highly visible liturgical role in France, effectively representing the Holy Father himself during a profoundly significant religious celebration. It is a role of profound honor, undeniable trust, and deep, resonant symbolic meaning. This gesture from Pope Leo XIV has, quite frankly, surprised many seasoned observers of the Vatican. Cardinal Robert Sarah has been known for his strong, often outspoken, and at times undeniably confrontational views on matters related to the Church, its sacred liturgy, and even past papal leadership. In the not-so-distant past, he has openly criticized modern practices surrounding the distribution of the Eucharist, describing them in stark terms as deeply problematic and spiritually harmful. He has also voiced strong, unwavering opposition to efforts that seek to limit the use of the traditional Latin Mass, framing such moves as dangerous for the life of the Church. Given the intensity of his language, the intellectual weight of his accusations, and the fact that some of these challenges have directly, unequivocally questioned recent decisions of the papacy itself, the very fact that Pope Leo XIV has extended this kind of high-profile responsibility to him is nothing short of striking. It stands out not as an oversight, but as a deliberate act of inclusion, and perhaps a courageous effort to build unity in the midst of long-standing, deeply entrenched divisions over liturgical practice within the Church. This decision by Pope Leo XIV can be seen, and indeed is being seen, in many different ways, depending on one's own perspective and long-held convictions. For some, particularly those who have felt marginalized or silenced in recent years, it may come across as a truly generous and profoundly thoughtful gesture, a genuine effort to reach out, to include voices that have often stood at odds with recent Church leadership. It signifies a willingness to bridge divides, to heal wounds. For others, however, it might raise immediate concern, especially if they view it as offering undue recognition or even validation to someone who has been openly, and at times harshly, critical of the papacy and its perceived direction in recent years. It all depends on where you stand. There will undoubtedly be those who welcome this as a hopeful sign of impending dialogue and reconciliation, a true spirit of Catholic universality. Others may see it as risky, perhaps even as inadvertently rewarding dissent and creating further instability. And many, perhaps the majority of faithful Catholics, will likely find themselves somewhere in the nuanced middle, unsure of what this gesture truly means, what its long-term implications are, but deeply interested to see what comes next, to discern the larger pattern. That, precisely, is why this story matters. To begin to understand Pope Leo XIV, one must resist the natural temptation to flatten him into a single idea, a convenient label, or a one-dimensional image. He is not, and cannot be, defined by just one action, one decision, or one fleeting headline. Like any leader facing extraordinarily complex times, he brings with him different layers, different priorities, and different, often subtle efforts to guide the Church through the immense challenges of today. And it is only by patiently, discerningly seeing the full, emerging picture that we can begin to truly understand the direction he hopes to take this vast, global, and ancient institution. This latest appointment also invites a deeper, more probing question. What does it truly reveal about the relationship between Pope Leo XIV and Cardinal Robert Sarah? On the surface, it may indeed seem like a simple liturgical assignment, a respectful nod to a senior cardinal during an important anniversary. But beneath that, there may be a more intentional, more strategic message at play. Pope Leo's decision to entrust Cardinal Sarah with such a prominent, even if brief, role suggests a profound willingness to look beyond past criticisms, beyond personal disagreements, and beyond the often bitter ideological skirmishes that have plagued the Church. It may point to a deeper recognition that true unity within the Church cannot be achieved by merely silencing every opposing voice, by banishing dissenting opinions, but sometimes, paradoxically, by giving those voices room to stand, to serve, and to contribute their unique charisms. For Cardinal Sarah, this could be a moment of significant rehabilitation in the eyes of the wider Vatican. His views on the liturgy have certainly been polarizing, sparking heated debates, but they have also resonated deeply with a significant number of faithful Catholics around the world who share his longing for greater reverence and tradition. By allowing him to preside over such a significant, high-profile celebration, Pope Leo may be signaling an openness to dialogue, not necessarily agreement on every point, but a willingness for coexistence, for shared purpose. It could be a crucial step toward healing some of the deep wounds that have tragically divided the Church in recent years. It may also reflect Pope Leo's broader vision for the Church, a Church that is not governed solely by rigid ideology or narrow partisan politics, but by profound pastoral wisdom, by a shepherd's heart. A Church where even sincere critics, if rooted in genuine faith and love for the ecclesial body, are not cast out into the outer darkness, but are invited to walk forward with dignity, with clear limits, and with a shared purpose. Of course, we cannot know his full, innermost intentions with absolute certainty. Only God truly knows the heart of a man. But actions like these speak volumes. They send ripples throughout the Catholic world. They remind us that church leadership is not just about abstract doctrine and rigid governance, but about patient discernment, impeccable timing, and most importantly, often profound mercy. And perhaps in this unexpected gesture, Pope Leo is not only building a bridge to Cardinal Sarah, but to every Catholic watching closely, wondering, indeed hoping, whether there is still room for both unvarnished truth and deep reconciliation at the altar of true unity. The decision to appoint Cardinal Robert Sarah as papal envoy for a major liturgical celebration in France has reignited a fundamental question that many Catholics have been asking often in hushed tones, since the very beginning of Pope Leo XIV's pontificate. What does the future truly hold for the traditional Latin Mass? For decades, the Latin Mass, with its ancient rites and venerable prayers, has been a persistent point of deep tension within the Church. To some, it represents a cherished, irreplaceable expression of reverence, timeless beauty, and unbroken continuity with 2 millennia of Catholic tradition. It is a spiritual anchor, a link to the past. To others, however, it regrettably symbolizes resistance to the necessary reforms of the Second Vatican Council, and at times, even a perceived rebellion against the legitimate authority of the Church's post-conciliar direction. It is seen as a source of division, not unity. The debate intensified dramatically during the previous pontificate, when significant restrictions were placed on the public celebration of the Tridentine Mass, most notably through the document Traditionis Custodes, issued in 2021. This decisive move was framed as a step toward achieving greater unity, an attempt to ensure that the Church was not perpetually divided between 2 liturgical expressions that, in the eyes of many, carried conflicting ecclesial identities and spiritual orientations. However, for many of the faithful deeply attached to the Latin Mass, those who found spiritual solace and connection in its ancient forms, it was received as a deep, personal wound. Priests found themselves limited, or in some cases, entirely removed from their traditional ministry. Communities built around the old rite felt displaced, disoriented, even persecuted. And voices like Cardinal Sarah's became louder, more insistent, affirming that something precious, something sacred, had been unjustly pushed to the margins. So when Pope Leo XIV, in his early months, extended this unexpected invitation to Cardinal Sarah, a man renowned for his passionate defense of the traditional liturgy, it did not go unnoticed. It sent a tremor through the Catholic world. At first glance, it might appear to be a minor event, confined to a specific time and place, a simple diplomatic courtesy. But in the Catholic Church, liturgical gestures are rarely, if ever, just symbolic. They often speak to deeper currents, subtle shifts in tone, and long-term strategies unfolding behind the scenes, carefully orchestrated. And this particular gesture could very well be an early, crucial sign of a new liturgical direction, one that significantly departs from the more restrictive, often punitive path of recent years. To truly understand why this matters, why this single appointment resonates so deeply, it's worth looking closely at who Cardinal Sarah is and what he represents within the complex tapestry of the Church. As the former prefect of the Congregation for Divine Worship and the Discipline of the Sacraments, Cardinal Sarah was for years one of the highest-ranking liturgical voices in the Vatican, wielding significant influence. During his tenure, he consistently advocated for a reform of the reform, a movement that sought to bring greater continuity, greater reverence, and a deeper sense of the sacred between the Novus Ordo Mass, introduced after Vatican II, and the traditional Latin liturgy that preceded it. His emphasis was always on reverence, on profound silence in the presence of the divine, on transcendent beauty, and above all, on the sacredness, the awesome mystery of the Eucharist. Cardinal Sarah did not simply defend the old rite. He passionately championed the idea that the Church, in its entirety, should rediscover a profound sense of awe in the tangible presence of God, that the liturgy should not be reduced to mere participation or superficial accessibility, but should, above all else, lift the human soul toward the divine, toward transcendence. His books, his homilies, and his numerous interviews often expressed a deep concern that the modern liturgy, while pastorally well-intentioned in its conception, had in some places, through careless implementation, tragically lost its transcendent character, its capacity to inspire true awe. These ideas gained strong, fervent support among traditional Catholics, especially among younger generations, who were actively rediscovering the beauty and profundity of the Latin Mass. But they also generated considerable controversy. His critics, often vociferous, accused him of fueling division, of resisting much-needed reforms, and of being unduly backward-looking. And after his resignation from his liturgical office was accepted, many wondered whether his powerful vision, his deeply held convictions, would quietly fade away into obscurity. Pope Leo XIV's decision to appoint him to a high-profile liturgical role, even for just 2 days, it suggests that Cardinal Sarah's voice is not being silenced. On the contrary, it is being acknowledged, even given a renewed platform. This may be Pope Leo's subtle yet clear way of reopening the conversation, not necessarily by reversing recent decisions outright, which would be a radical and perhaps destabilizing move, but by slowly, patiently broadening the circle of voices allowed back into the hallowed liturgical space, allowing a more diverse range of perspectives to be heard. If that is indeed the case, we may very well be witnessing the beginning of a significant recalibration, a perceptible shift from restriction to reconciliation, from rigid oversight to a more pastoral embrace. It's still too early to say whether this will lead to a formal revision of Traditionis Custodes or a new set of broader permissions for the Latin Mass. The Church moves with the pace of centuries, not fleeting news cycles. But even without new documents or explicit decrees, the tone of leadership matters profoundly. Under the previous pontificate, the approach to the Latin Mass was often one of caution, concern, and firm oversight, marked by a sense of necessary containment. Under Pope Leo XIV, we may begin to see an approach that is more measured, more nuanced, still seeking unity, but with a discernible openness to a healthy pluralism in liturgical expression. That pluralism, if handled with wisdom and grace, could actually strengthen unity rather than weaken it. Throughout the vast, rich tapestry of church history, liturgical diversity has never been the enemy of communion. From the ancient Mozarabic rite in Spain to the venerable Ambrosian rite in Milan, the Church has long permitted different forms of worship, different expressions of faith, so long as they remained firmly in harmony with fundamental doctrine and legitimate ecclesial authority. What truly becomes dangerous is not healthy variety, but corrosive division, when different rites, different spiritualities become symbols of ideological warfare, of partisan struggle. When that happens, the liturgy itself suffers, the faithful suffer deeply, and the very mission of the Church is obscured, its message diluted. Pope Leo may be trying to bring the conversation back to the essentials, to shift the focus from a sterile debate about which Mass is better to a more profound question. How can the liturgy, in all its forms, best draw human hearts closer to Christ? That question transcends mere preferences and superficial debates. It invites unity not through forced control, but through authentic spiritual encounter. And by inviting Cardinal Sarah back into a visible public role, even temporarily, Pope Leo may be signaling that traditional voices still have a legitimate, respected seat at the table of the Church's ongoing discernment. Of course, none of this will please everyone. Such is the nature of leading a universal Church. There will be those who see any softening toward the Latin Mass as a perilous step backward, a betrayal of the Council. Others will believe it does not go nearly far enough, that radical restoration is required. But if this pontificate is truly going to succeed in healing the deep, festering wounds of liturgical division, it will require immense patience, unwavering courage, and above all, profound trust on both sides of the divide. The Latin Mass is not going away, nor is the Novus Ordo. The challenge is not choosing one over the other in a zero-sum game. The profound challenge is helping them coexist without rivalry, without antagonism, solely in the service of the one mission Christ gave His Church: to sanctify, to teach, and to love. Pope Leo XIV's vision is still unfolding, a delicate bloom in early spring. But if this early, unexpected decision tells us anything, it's that he may be more interested in building bridges of understanding than in drawing lines of division. And in today's fractured world, that in itself is a truly radical. As the dust begins to settle from the first few months of Pope Leo XIV's pontificate, a clearer, more nuanced picture is beginning to emerge, not only of the man himself, but of the kind of discerning, steady leadership he may bring to the global church. Every new pope faces a critical, defining period at the very beginning of his tenure. These early choices, appointments, homilies, public messages, and even moments of strategic silence profoundly shape how the world perceives his priorities and his overall direction. For some popes, this period is about doctrinal correction, a firm reassertion of orthodoxy. For others, it is about sweeping pastoral outreach, a focus on mercy and inclusion. For Pope Leo XIV, these early signals suggest something subtly, yet significantly, different. A profound desire to restore balance in a church that has felt increasingly pulled in opposing, even contradictory, directions. His appointment of Cardinal Sarah, which we've explored, is certainly one compelling example, but it is by no means an isolated event. In recent weeks, Pope Leo has also made other moves that reflect a careful, deliberate effort to stabilize internal tensions, to mend frayed relationships, without appearing reactionary or simply undoing his predecessor's work. Rather than pushing rapid, immediate reforms or hastily reversing established policies, he seems to be opting for a slower, more thoughtful recalibration, a soft but firm rebalancing of the Church's spiritual compass, guiding it back to its fundamental orientation. One of the clearest signs of this comes not from what he has changed, but remarkably, from what he has chosen to leave untouched for now. Unlike some past papal transitions, Pope Leo has not swept through the Roman Curia with rapid, wholesale restructuring. He has not issued a sudden wave of new, groundbreaking documents or policy changes that would send shockwaves through the various departments. Instead, he has quietly, consistently emphasized core theological and spiritual themes, the absolute centrality of Christ, the profound importance of the sacraments, the universal call to holiness that every baptized person shares, and the urgent need for interior renewal. In his first major addresses and homilies, he has returned often to these timeless basics, the very bedrock of Catholic faith. This approach may seem unremarkable, even understated at first glance, but in a time when church discourse is so often dominated by controversy over doctrine, liturgy, culture wars, or partisan politics, this deliberate, patient return to spiritual fundamentals sends a powerful, counter-cultural message. It suggests that Pope Leo is not entering office with a predetermined political agenda or with a desire to win ideological battles, but with a profoundly pastoral mission: to guide souls closer to God. Still, that mission is unfolding in a world vastly different from the one previous popes inherited. The global Catholic Church in 2025 is now more decentralized, more diverse, and more complex than perhaps ever before. In places like Africa and Asia, the faith is growing rapidly, burgeoning with new vocations, young families, and a vibrant hunger for clear moral and spiritual guidance, often rooted in a more traditional sense of worship and conviction. In stark contrast, many Western dioceses are facing declining vocations, shrinking mass attendance, and rising pressure to adapt to increasingly secular norms, sometimes at the expense of core identity. In this profoundly complex context, Pope Leo faces a daunting, almost overwhelming task: how to lead a church that is both ancient and thoroughly modern, globally expansive yet deeply localized, unified in faith yet incredibly diverse in its cultural expressions. His actions so far suggest he understands this multifaceted challenge exceptionally well. By giving Cardinal Sarah a prominent public role, he is clearly acknowledging the deep spiritual hunger and heartfelt concerns found in parts of the Church that have often felt overlooked, alienated, or even dismissed. At the same time, he has not abandoned the pastoral language of accompaniment, dialogue, and mercy that marked previous years. He has simply begun to balance it, to infuse it, with a renewed attention to tradition, profound reverence, and core orthodoxy. Some astute commentators have called this an era of listening, but not a listening that leads to doctrinal flexibility. Rather, it is a listening that leads to careful discernment, a way of truly hearing the concerns of the faithful, of understanding their struggles, without abandoning the immutable truth handed down through the ages. This balanced tone is especially evident in his approach to theological disagreement. Pope Leo has not responded with harsh condemnations or sweeping unilateral corrections. Instead, he appears to be gently, persistently reintroducing a forgotten yet vital idea. That unity in the Church does not necessarily mean absolute uniformity in every expression, and that genuine disagreement, when rooted in sincere faith and a true love for the Church, can, paradoxically, become the fertile soil in which deeper understanding and richer theology can grow. But even this nuanced approach comes with inherent risks. There are those who fear that too much openness will allow confusion to spread, to dilute the clear message of the gospel. Others worry that any attempt to restore or even acknowledge traditional practices will alienate progressive Catholics who have embraced post-conciliar reforms with enthusiasm. These profound tensions will not be resolved overnight, and perhaps not even within the span of one pontificate. Still, early signs suggest that Pope Leo is willing to embrace the long road, the patient road, the arduous road of rebuilding fundamental trust. That trust has been deeply shaken in recent years, not just by theological disputes or liturgical battles, but by profound scandals, by internal divisions, and by a growing sense of weariness and fatigue among many of the faithful. For some, the Church has, tragically, come to feel like a battleground, a place of endless conflict and argument. For others, it resembles a cold, distant bureaucracy. In both cases, the living, beating heart of the gospel has felt distant, obscured. If Pope Leo can succeed in recentering the Church on what truly matters, on Christ, on the transforming power of the sacraments, on the universal call to holiness, he may accomplish something no mere document or structural reform ever could: the quiet, profound restoration of faith in the Church's timeless mission. Of course, this will require more than just symbolism. It will demand immense courage and unwavering clarity. And at times, it will undoubtedly require necessary confrontation against those who seek to sow division or undermine the Church's truth. But it also requires what Pope Leo seems to be offering so far: a calm and prayerful presence, a willingness to carry the tensions of the Church without immediately demanding simplistic resolutions. A pope who leads not as a politician, but as a true shepherd. The months ahead will offer more crucial clues. Will Pope Leo issue new guidelines on the Latin Mass, or further clarify existing ones? Will he undertake a significant reform of the Roman Curia, the Vatican's administrative heart? Will he address pressing moral debates of our time with fresh, compelling language, or simply by pointing back, with renewed conviction, to what the Church has always taught? We do not yet know the full answers to these questions. But we do know this: in his earliest formative actions, Pope Leo XIV has chosen a path that is neither strictly revolutionary nor simply reactionary. It is, instead, a path of deliberate rebalancing, of attentive listening without surrendering foundational truth, of leading without shouting, and perhaps, most importantly, of healing without ever forgetting what caused the wounds in the first place. In a time when the Church is searching desperately for both clear direction and profound peace, that may be exactly what is needed. As we take a step back and look at the early days of Pope Leo XIV's papacy, one thing becomes increasingly clear: This is not a papacy rushing to prove itself, to make a bold, immediate mark on history. It is a papacy that listens first, moves carefully and deliberately, and seems to profoundly understand the immense weight and complexity of every decision, especially in a church as global, diverse, and wounded as the one it now leads. The decision to appoint Cardinal Robert Sarah as special envoy for the liturgical celebrations in France was more than a mere diplomatic gesture. It was a signpost, a moment that strongly suggested Pope Leo is not interested in continuing the old, tiresome battles of progressive versus traditionalist. Instead, he may be charting a fundamentally different course through the middle, not compromising the truth, but calling all sides to something higher, something deeper, something truly universal, something profoundly Catholic. That word, Catholic, meaning universal, has never been easy to live out in practice. The Church stretches across countless cultures, speaks a multitude of languages, navigates diverse political systems and vast economic divides. It speaks to the rich and the poor, the learned and the uneducated, the profound sinner and the radiant saint. And somehow, in every age, the timeless message of the gospel remains profoundly relevant, eternally compelling. That's the abiding mystery the Church carries, a divine treasure in earthen vessels. And that's the mystery Pope Leo is now stewarding, holding in his hands with quiet determination. But he's doing it at a time unlike any other in recent memory. The Catholic Church in 2025 stands at a profound crossroads. In some regions of the world, particularly in the global South, it's growing rapidly, vibrant, and full of vocations, young families, and a palpable hunger for clear moral and spiritual guidance. In others, particularly in many Western nations, it is shrinking, losing its voice in public life and its tangible presence in daily life. The divide is not just geographic, it's generational, cultural, and deeply, intensely liturgical. And the Latin Mass, as we discussed, has regrettably become a potent symbol of that divide, a flag planted in contested territory. For some, it represents a spiritual home, a sacred space of silence, reverence, and unbroken continuity with their spiritual ancestors. For others, it feels like a painful rejection of the Church's journey since the Second Vatican Council, a step backward from necessary aggiornamento. These aren't just mere differences in style. They reveal deeper, existential questions. What is the Church truly becoming? What sacred patrimony should it hold on to with unwavering conviction? And what must it, through prayerful discernment, finally leave behind? Pope Leo's answer, as it is slowly unfolding, seems to be this. Before decisively choosing what to keep or what to discard, we must first and foremost remember who we are in Christ. His earliest homilies have not focused on grand programs or specific policy changes. They have focused with unwavering intensity on the Eucharist, on the transformative power of prayer, on the urgent need to repent, to convert, and to continually return to Christ, the true center. In doing so, he's not avoiding the big, contentious debates of our time. He's reminding the entire Church where its true strength comes from, where its true identity lies. And by giving a platform, however temporary, to a figure like Cardinal Sarah, he's extending that vital reminder to those who may have felt pushed aside, unheard, or even betrayed. It is remarkably easy to mistake patience for indecision or quiet deliberation for weakness. But Pope Leo's measured restraint, his deliberate, unhurried pace, may be the most intentional, the most strategic thing about him. He's not rushing to please one particular group or to alienate another with hasty pronouncements. He seems to understand, profoundly, that the Church is not a mere machine to be fixed with quick adjustments, nor a corporation to be managed with rapid, sweeping reforms. It is a living body, a mystical body, the very body of Christ on earth. A body that heals slowly, organically, through the pervasive grace of God, through the timeless truth of the gospel, and through the patient unfolding of divine time. And yet, make no mistake, these early, quiet choices are profoundly shaping the future of the Church. They are setting the tone for how liturgical debates might be handled in the coming years, for how dissenting, yet faithful voices might be treated, for how unity might be pursued, not through force or coercion, but through unwavering fidelity to Christ, fidelity to the sacred deposit of faith handed down, and fidelity to a church that is both profoundly human and undeniably divine, broken and yet eternally beautiful. This matters deeply, profoundly, especially to younger Catholics across the globe. Many of them have grown up in a world of profound uncertainty, a world that relentlessly promises endless freedom but often delivers only confusion and anxiety. It is a world filled with endless noise, yet starved of genuine meaning, true purpose. And in that chaotic world, they are not turning away from tradition. They are, paradoxically, rediscovering it with fervent hunger. They are attending Latin masses, not necessarily to protest modernity, but to find a sense of profound reverence, a sacred silence that speaks to their souls. They are reading the Church Fathers, not to escape modernity, but to anchor themselves in timeless truth, in wisdom that transcends the fleeting trends of contemporary thought. If Pope Leo continues to recognize and courageously encourage this movement, not as a threat to progress, but as a vital sign of spiritual life, a springtime of faith, he may help the Church breathe again, not by undoing Vatican II, and certainly not by idolizing the past in a stagnant way, but by reconnecting the Church's future, its vibrant growth, to its deepest, enduring foundations. At the same time, he cannot and will not ignore the legitimate pastoral needs of those for whom the Latin Mass remains foreign, inaccessible, or even, for various reasons, painful. The challenge ahead, a colossal one, will be to skillfully create genuine space for ancient tradition without fostering new divisions, to boldly uphold doctrinal clarity while remaining pastorally present and compassionate to all, to speak the truth with unwavering conviction, and yet to love deeply, universally. That is not an easy task, but perhaps it is the unique providential task Pope Leo XIV was chosen for. And perhaps in his quiet, unassuming way, he is already showing us how to begin this arduous journey. By welcoming Cardinal Sarah into a temporary, yet symbolically potent role, he extended a hand. By avoiding dramatic, immediate shakeups in the Vatican Curia, he steadied the ship amidst turbulent waters. By focusing unwaveringly on Christ and not on petty controversy, he reminded the entire Church of its ultimate saving mission. And by doing all of this without seeking the constant spotlight, without grand pronouncements, he modeled a different kind of strength, the humble yet immensely powerful strength of true humility. This is leadership not built on fleeting slogans, but on quiet sacrifice, on prayer, on a deep listening heart. The days and months ahead will undoubtedly test this leadership in countless ways. There will be immense pressure from both sides. Some will demand bold, immediate reforms. Others will push for strong, uncompromising corrections. But if Pope Leo remains rooted in prayer, grounded in immutable truth, and profoundly open to the guiding whispers of the Holy Spirit, he may help lead the Church into something it desperately needs, not a forced return to the past, and not a blind, reckless leap into an uncertain future, but a profound spiritual renewal. A deeper, more authentic renewal that bridges generations, heals old wounds, and unites the faithful in sacred worship, selfless service, and transformative love. Because at the end of the day, that is what the Church truly exists for endless debates or voluminous documents, but for souls that are searching for meaning, souls that are suffering in silence, souls that are still profoundly capable of being moved by transcendent beauty, convicted by eternal truth, and utterly transformed by divine grace. And so, as this new papacy continues to unfold, the eyes of the world and the fervent prayers of the faithful remain fixed on the man now humbly, yet powerfully, carrying the keys of Peter. A man who may not speak loudly, but who may, in the quiet strength of his early decisions, be pointing the church towards something eternal. Not a new direction, but the right one.